If you've been following real estate news, you probably already heard about this mass class action lawsuits, the Scissor Burnett versus NAR, which was filed in the state of Missouri's federal court by a group of home sellers against NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and a bunch of nationwide big real estate companies. The plaintiffs claims that the real estate commission rates are too high, buyers' representatives are paid too much, and NAR's Code of Ethics and MLS Handbook, along with the corporate defendants' practice, lead to inflated commission rates. In the end, a Kansas City jury finds NAR, Home Service of America, and Keller Williams liable for colluding to inflate or maintain high commission rates. Consequently, NAR has settled and agreed to pay $418 million in damage payments. Not only that, as a result, a new proposed change regarding to how real estate agent commission is handled will take effect on August 17th, 2024. Many believe that this will change the way real estate deals are done forever. But is it so? Hello, everybody. My name is Boji He, your local Bay Area real estate expert, and welcome back to my channel. A lot of changes are happening in the real estate industry right now, and several of these changes are proposed and will take effect on August 17th, 2024 in California. There are a lot of misinformations out there on the internet, while I actually have copies of these new required real estate contracts in draft versions. So in this video, I am going to break it down for you on what these changes are and how they will impact buyers and sellers post August 17th. Let's start with the seller. Traditionally and currently, when a seller and a listing agent get together and discuss the sale of the home, when it comes to commission discussion, the most common things that they will talk about is just that one number, the total commission, which is the 6% or the 5% that we commonly see around. And of course, the listing agent will let the seller know that a portion of that total commission will be used to pay a buyer's agent if a buyer is brought by that agent. But as far as seller is concerned, as long as they agree on the total commission, seller wouldn't bother about what if this, what if that. As long as you bring me a good offer, I agree to pay you that total percentage. But now with the new regulation, things are different. The total commission is no longer mentioned on the listing contract, and they will be broken down into various scenarios. Seller will have the opportunity to look at different scenarios and either agree or disagree or negotiate with the listing agent. Another important thing is the offering of buyer agent commission. It's still an option with the new rules. However, they are prohibited to be advertised or mentioned on any MLS or consumer facing real estate websites. So let's take a look at the new listing agreement and see what it looks like. All right, here we are looking at this new contract. This is a draft version, but it's still looking very different from the old listing agreement. So starting from the top, there's not much difference, just identifying the party and the property. And notice that these new contracts, the maximum listing period is 24 months, no more than 2 years, unless the seller is corporation or LLC. So that's that. And then if you come down here, listing period began on what day, end on what day, listing price, and the type of property. That's all pretty standard. But if you look at section C, this is where the commission part begins. And so here the contract emphasized, the amount of the rate of commission is not fixed by law. They're set by between broker and negotiate between seller and the broker. So they're re-emphasizing on, basically this is why they got sued, and they're re-emphasizing on this point. And coming down here, okay, so the first item is compensation to seller broker. Now it says re-emphasize only seller side of the transaction. and the percentage of the list price, or a fixed number. So this is the commission you pay the listing agent to prep your home, put your home on the market, and negotiate on your behalf and market your home. So that's what this commission is. It's no longer the total commission. Down here, 4B, it says applicable only if checked. Optional additional compensation for seller's broker to offer to buyer's broker. So you can see here that seller is given an option to offer additional compensation for the buyer broker. But this part will not be allowed to be advertised on the internet anymore. You can still agree to offer the compensation, but buyer and the buyer's broker would just have to call the listing agent to find out. They're not going to see that on the internet. And this part, additional compensation to seller's broker if buyer is unrepresented. So if you're dealing with a buyer who doesn't have an agent and the listing agent is not representing that buyer, it's representing you, the seller, there's going to be additional work that the listing agent needs to do to facilitate the transaction with this unrepresented buyer. And in this case, seller could negotiate additional commissions for that extra work. So that's that scenario. And the following scenario is if the same individual agent represents both sellers and buyers. So we're talking about dual agencies. If this buyer is also a client of the listing agent, they've known each other for a long time, and in this case, the listing agent does represent both you and the buyer, then in a situation like this, the seller and the listing agent can negotiate a total commission, whatever the case might be. So that's just a different situation. And the next one is really just a total commission. Now, the total commission could be either A, B, C. Seller and agents get to negotiate and decide. But the total listing compensation will not be written anywhere. You just have to do the math. And down here, it says optional seller concession. Now, concession is different from compensation or commission. Concession is basically an amount that seller would credit the buyer for anything, repairs, closing costs, and buyer could use that amount, the concession amount, to pay a buyer's agent commission. So that's an option. So that would be another way for seller to compensate is through concession. The only thing to note is that if the buyer is an FHA buyer or VA buyer, then buyers are not allowed to pay buyer agent anything. So, this strategy, this option would work for regular deals and perhaps cash buyers, if the concession's intent was to pay buyer agent's commission. Other than that, I think the rest of the document is pretty standard. It's pretty similar to the old listing agreement. So the only big changes are really just the commission section, and they're really breaking it down to every scenario. They're decoupling everything, and that's interesting. And this will be the new listing agreement that we will use going forward. And I think there will still be some changes because this is still a draft version, but we can see the direction that it goes. As you can see, the new contract does not prohibit seller from offering buyer agent compensations. The change is to make the commission discussion more transparent to all parties. And a lot of you might ask, should a seller offer compensations to buyer agents at all? And my response to that is, since everything is negotiable, it really depends on the deal and the numbers. There is no such thing as should or shouldn't. I can give you a few scenarios to think about. First, let's say you have a buyer who's offering a really good price on this property. The only thing is that the buyer has an agent that you cannot get around. And in this particular relationship, the buyer does not offer buyer agent compensation. And the buyer is really tied up with all the cash and the down payments and the closing costs. it really doesn't have any additional money set aside for the buyer agent compensation if they're gonna sustain that offer. So in situations like this, the seller has a choice to step in, if of course the number makes sense, to compensate buyer agents and get the deal done. And another situation would be, let's say the seller wants as many buyers to come see the home as the market have and create a multiple bidding situation. Well, one great way to do such thing is by letting all the buyer agent knows that we will take care of your compensation. Just bring a buyer. By doing so, more buyer agents are going to bring buyers to see the home. And when it comes to bidding, buyers know that they don't have to set some cash aside to pay their own agents. Now they have more purchasing power. They have more bidding power to basically drive up the price. Because think about it, that extra $10,000, $20,000, if it's cash paid to the agent, it's cash out of their pocket. But if it can be added to the deal, then they have 30 years to pay it off. So if you want to create a multiple bidding situation, that kind of environment, by offering buyer agent compensation could be a very good strategy to do so. But either way, the main point is that seller remains options to negotiate and choose to either compensate buyer agents or not. Everything is up to negotiation. And I think this change is making the commission discussion a lot more transparent and a lot more robust and a lot more flexible. The selling process hasn't changed. So therefore, I think that this is something that the seller and the listing agent will quickly adapt and get used to. Now, let's talk about buyers. Traditionally and currently, in order for buyers and buyers agents to work together, all they need is a verbal agreement. A buyer broker agreement is not required. But with these new changes, the buyer broker agreement becomes mandatory for any buyers wanting to hire a buyer's agent. Now, this new buyer broker agreement has two important features. Number one, is it exclusive or non exclusive? Number two, who is paying the buyer broker commission and how much? So, we're going to take a quick look at this new buyer broker agreement and see what it actually says. All right, here is the buyer broker agreement in draft version. So, let's take a quick look. So the first thing it says is that the maximum representation period is 3 months allowed. And so that means if you sign a buyer broker agreement with an agent, it's no more than 3 months and you have to renew afterwards. And down here, it's pretty simple. It's just beginning on what day and ends on what day. Now, this part is important. The type of representation, it's either non-exclusive or exclusive. So whichever one that you sign, yeah, make sure you know which one you're getting. And the way I look at it is, when you are just starting out looking for homes and interviewing agents, you really don't know what you're getting into. So maybe it's a good idea to start with someone with a non-exclusive, and then if you like that person's service, you can turn that into an exclusive. That's why this option is there, and I do like that. So down here, paragraph B, section B, these are basically just specifying where you're looking to buy and what type of home you're looking to buy and any specific terms. So we're gonna skip that. And section D is really important. This is where the commission discussion happens. So again, here it is reiterated that amount or the rate of commission is not fixed by law, just like in the listing agreement is set by broker and in negotiate between buyers and the brokers. So we know that. So this part, section D1, amount of compensation, this will be a percentage or a flat fee, a percentage of the acquisition price or a flat fee or anything else you want to specify. So this amount will be what buyers, should pay their agent. And the second paragraph, the second section is important. Payments from third parties. Now remember, in the listing agreement, sellers are not prohibited from offering compensation to a buyer agent. And therefore, in the corresponding buyer agent agreement, it also has this section. It basically says that if any payment from third party, in this case, most likely it's going to come from the seller, should be credited against buyer's obligation to pay broker, and broker shall not receive any amount in excess of paragraph 2D1, which is what you put here, unless the amount is modified in subsequent written agreement. So this part, what it means is that, let's say you put let's say 2.5% right here on 2D1, and let's say for this particular deal the seller is offering 3%. So there is a 0.5% over the amount. But in this agreement, it basically says broker will still just get paid 2.5%, the buyer's broker, even if somebody offers 3%. What are they going to do with that extra 0.5%? I don't know yet, but it might be accredited towards buyer's closing costs. I don't know. We'll see. Let's say another situation, it says 2.5% right here. That's the buyer's obligation to pay broker. And in this particular deal, the seller is offering 2%. So that's 0.5% less than buyer's obligation. So now buyer is still obligated to pay broker 0.5%. But then it is really up to the agent and the buyer to work things out. The agent could insist on 0.5%, or could let that go, or could negotiate with the seller to come up with that 0.5%. Whatever the case might be, it's upon negotiations, and buyer can decide whether to make an offer or not based on the commission situation. So they're not 100% obligated or tied to a situation where they have to pay a commission. Again, everything is negotiable. And here, this part basically says, buyer's financial and personal information um, within 5 days or however many days from the execution of agreement. So this means that buyers should provide financial and personal information to the buyer broker within that many days, such as buyer's pre-approvals, that type of information. And if that doesn't happen, buyer's broker could basically just cancel the agreement. That's it. You know, you're not really obligated to pay buyer broker fees if you don't provide this information in 5 calendar days. And the rest of the contract, a lot of the paragraphs are dedicated to broker's right to compensate, and you can read about all this. If you want a copy of the draft contract, just email me or comment down below or get a hold of me. I'd be happy to email you the draft version so you can analyze it. And another thing I want to show you is you can also request seller to offer buyer broker compensation by writing it in the purchase offer. Say, in case that, let's say the buyer broker, let's say the listing agent is really busy, and you call and they don't pick up the phone, but you want to make an offer and you don't know if they offer a buyer broker commissions or not, or how much, you can include that into your purchase agreement. Just send it in, and if they like your price, they like your terms, they will counter you. They'll negotiate with you on the purchase. So let me show you where to do that in the purchase agreement. So this is the new purchase agreement, which is mostly the same as the old one. And on this page, second page right here, the G15E is seller credit to buyer. This is the seller concession. Okay, you could use that to, buyer could use that to pay their agents, unless buyer's FHA or VA can do that. Or this paragraph right here, G318, if you make that checkbox, it says seller agreed to pay the obligation of buyer to compensate buyer broker under a separate agreement called SPBB. So you can put that in your offer, and then in the SPBB you can specify how much buyer broker should get paid from the seller, and basically just include this as part of your purchase agreement, purchase offer, and you can say buyer is willing to offer this much, and under this condition of seller pays buyer agent commission in cash, so that the buyer could leverage more financed money, to fulfill that obligation of the offer price. So this is another place where you can include that in your negotiation when you make an offer. So the moral of the story is, even though on the purchase buyer broker agreement it says that buyer is obligated to pay buyer broker, but there's still a lot of rooms to negotiate in the offer. So I would say this is something that it just changes the way the negotiations are done, but overall it's still pretty wide open. Anybody can negotiate anything. Everything comes down to the number and the deal. My take on this agreement is that it's now making the buyer and the buyer's agent having to lay everything out right at the beginning. Now, in the past, a buyer and the buyer's agents are working together based on verbal agreements. This leaves a lot of uncertain things. For example, buyers are always unsure about what agents do exactly. What are their services like? Why do they get paid so much? And the buyer's agents are probably hoping and praying every day, hoping that the buyer will be loyal. And this uncertainty will go on until either the deal is done or not done. And now the new law basically requires these uncertainties to be addressed right at the beginning. I know some of you may ask, who is going to enforce on the practice of signing buyer broker agreement at the beginning? Can you sign it later? Well, if you look at the buyer broker agreement that we just reviewed, the amount of money that a buyer's agent will make, it's completely based on the number that they put in the buyer broker compensation, that 2D1. So with that, trust me, buyer's agent are definitely going to want to have this commission discussion with their buyer ASAP. And at the same time, if you are a buyer, you want to get that discussions done right at the beginning too, because you don't want to wait until the last minute when you're about to write an offer to a dream home and then have to talk about who gets paid and how much and all that. And what if the discussion doesn't end very well? So this is something, as a buyer, certainly want to get that out of the way sooner rather than later too. So going forward, as you can imagine, a buyer is definitely going to interview buyer's agent just as hard as the seller interviewing listing agent. And of course, if you're not sure about whether this agent is the right person to work with, you can always start with a non-exclusive. And then at some point, you're probably going to want to turn that into an exclusive if that's the right person. But buyers definitely going to take interviewing buyer agent a lot more seriously. And agents definitely will have to showcase their values and present their service in a much more effective way to earn business. The days of working with multiple buyer agents at the same time and going with whoever that brings them the deal, it's probably going to be gone. Now, what do I think about how these changes will impact the real estate industry and how a transaction is handled post August 17th? Currently, there are two major voices on the internet. One says everything will change. Buyer agents will cease to exist because buyers are going to go directly to the listing agent unrepresented to avoid having to pay buyer agent commission. And therefore, these buyer agents will be out of business. They should be looking for another job and etc. I personally find that this saying is a little too early to be concluded. Personally, I think that because most buyers are first-time home buyer, there are going to be a few savvy, experienced investors and second time buyer and so, but most buyers there across the United States are going to be the first time home buyer that have very little experience when it comes to buying a home. If you have these people go into a transaction unrepresented, I don't think things will end very well for the majority of these group of consumers. There will be more lawsuits, more issues. So the value of buyer agent has been established in the marketplace for decades. And if they're completely useless, they would have been eliminated by the market a long time ago. It won't take this lawsuit to eliminate them. So that's just my opinion on this type of saying. And then the second group of people would say that nothing really changes, or the change that we're making isn't fundamentally different from what we're already doing. Everything was negotiable and everything continues to be negotiable. So nothing changes. With that, buyers will continue working with buyer's agent and sellers will continue working with buyer's agent because they know that's how you get your home sold with top dollars. And if that's the case, nothing really changes. And I personally think that both sayings are possibilities, and we would just have to see what do buyers and sellers commonly do after August 17th. So everything is possible. We'll just have to see how the market react to this change in California. With all that, I want to hear from you. What do you think about this lawsuit and these changes? Would you work with a real estate agent when you want to buy or sell? What do you think real estate agent's biggest value would be to you? Comment down below and let me know. And regardless, there are so many misinformations out there on the internet. I just want you guys to be well prepared and well informed through this video so that in the future, if you ever work with a real estate agent, you know what to expect. All right, that's it for this video. I know there's a lot of information that we're covering. And again, if you guys would like a copy of these new draft contracts, just comment down below or personally reach out to me and I'd be happy to email you a copy. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel for more real estate videos in the future. All right, thank you for your time. I'll see you guys next time.